Hi everybody, and welcome to the first tutorial in the Stamperia Ooh La La mini album tutorial series designed for Scrap and Create. In this tutorial, we're going to begin building the base pages of the album using the pink cardstock, or if you're using a different color, you can select that too. And then eventually we'll be decorating in the Ooh La La papers. So for right now, what we need to do is set all of our decorative papers aside. Go ahead and grab your scoring board and your scoring tool. You'll need a paper trimmer and your pink cardstock to begin the process of building those base pages. From one sheet of 12 by 12 paper, I first cut vertically at 6 inches for 2 pieces. Then on the one piece, I cut this to 9 3/4 of an inch. The second piece I cut to 10 3/4 of an inch. We're going to set the 9 3/4 inch piece aside, and we're going to use the scoring board for our 10 3/4 inch piece. So placing the 10 3/4 inch edge against your scoring board, we want to score this at 1/2 inch and 10 1/4 inches. Now, once I have my piece scored, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to miter that corner in from the score line here, inward on that 1/2 inch tab section. This will allow the photo mats to slide in and out of those pockets a little bit easier. It won't get hung up on that paper. So once we have that paper removed, we're going to turn the piece over and fold on these score lines, and then use your bone folder to burnish these folds. The better you burnish it, the flatter your pages will lay. So that's why a bone folder is a really important part of the mini album making process. So once we have our tabs scored and folded, we can go ahead and bring the other piece in, and you will see that it is the exact same size as our page once those tabs are folded. That will create that pocket between the two pages. Now I'm going to take my adhesive and I'm going to add it to the back of one of my 1/2 inch tabs. If you feel comfortable doing both at the same time, you can, but if you're new to making mini albums or just don't feel comfortable doing both at once, just do one at a time. So I'm going to take my piece and line it up with the edges so that the top edge and the sides are all lined up, and then the bottom edge should be in line too. Once I have that where it should go, I'm going to take my bone folder and burnish that fold one more time. Then I'm going to open up and burnish my fold again. Then I'm going to take my adhesive and I will apply the adhesive to the back of the second tab. You don't need to use too much adhesive here, so that is something that you need to kind of learn if you're new to making mini albums. If you put too much adhesive, it will warp your paper. To get this to lay as flat as possible, smooth it from the side that is already on, and then go down really flat, and then you can use your bone folder to adhere this together. So now we have our pocket page here. This will go to our hinge, and then this will be the pocket for our photo mat. Once we have the first one finished, I've got 3 more pieces, same thing. I've already folded the ones that have the tabs on it, and I've got 3 more of the other pieces too. So you'll need a total of 4 pages for the album. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same exact thing on these that I did on the first one. So go ahead and take your time, apply your adhesive to your tab on one, line everything up, adhere it down and use your bone folder, then apply adhesive to the second tab to create those pocket pages. Once my pages are all complete, I put 1 front, 1 back, 2 front, 2 back, and so on, just so that I know which is which once I start building these pages up. I'm going to set those aside and we're going to come in and start making the cover itself. So I have 2 pieces of chipboard that measure 6.5 by 10 inches. And I have 1 piece of chipboard that measures 2.5 by 10 inches. I'm going to set the spine piece aside for now. We're going to work on the covers first. I've cut 2 pieces of my cardstock to 8.5 by 12 inches. Starting with one of the pieces on the opposite side, it doesn't matter which side you do it, I just did it on the opposite side. I measured up 1 inch and I drew a vertical or a horizontal line so that I have kind of like a placement guide to be able to adhere this down. I'm going to place this here in the center, right on this line, so that I have an inch border around the entire piece. Using my tacky glue, I have covered the back of my chipboard, and I'm just going to turn this over, and I'm going to use the grid on my board as a way to measure on the sides, and I'll place the edge right along that guideline that I drew down at the bottom, and I'll burnish this down to my cardstock. Once I have my first piece done, I'm going to do the same thing with the second piece. I have my guideline on this one, and I'm going to adhere this to the center, and then we'll come back and start wrapping these. Once the pieces are on the cardstock, we're going to remove the piece of the cardstock from the corner, but we don't want to go all the way up to the chipboard. So we are going to leave about 1/8 of an inch from the chipboard so that we can completely wrap this corner when we are doing the next step. So just be very careful that you don't cut too close to that chipboard as you're doing this. I'm going to do the same thing on my second piece. And now we can go ahead and begin wrapping these. Taking one piece, I like to just start working my edges first. And because this cardstock is a little bit thicker than the 65-pound that I often use, I am going to be really careful when I fold this. I want to make sure that it doesn't crack. So I'm going to crease it well and bend it and use my bone folder to shape it around my chipboard. Next, I'm going to take my adhesive on my smaller tab sections. I'm going to start there first, and then we'll wrap the corners, and then we'll do the larger tab sections. So first I'm just applying my adhesive on this entire tab section. Then I'm going to wrap this and use my bone folder to burnish this down really well. Once it's burnished down, I'm going to take my bone folder along the edge and just press that paper right into the edge with my bone folder, and that's going to wrap that corner. Then I'm going to add my adhesive to the second of the smaller sections here, and I'll repeat that same process on this side and wrap these two corners. And again, I'm just going to take my bone folder and press it up against the edge of my paper to crease it and fold it right around my corner. So now I've got these two corners wrapped. I'm going to take my long edges and I'm going to flatten these down. I'm going to open these back up and I'm going to take my bone folder and press this paper in so that it doesn't stick out past my cover whenever I glue this one down. So we've pressed the paper up against the edge and now we're just pressing it inward to make sure that it will wrap correctly. And then I'm going to take my adhesive and I'm going to cover this entire tab section here, making sure that I get up to the edges so that there isn't any lifted paper once I go to adhere this down. So once I have that done, you'll see my edges are perfectly straight with these edges here and my corners are wrapped. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on this side, making sure that I completely cover this with adhesive, not too much adhesive. I like to use the nozzle to actually push the glue around so I don't squeeze a lot out, but I just press the glue into the paper and then spread it around. And then I'm going to cover this and use my bone folder to adhere it down. And now the first cover is completely wrapped. Going to do the same thing with the second cover and then come back and do the spine piece. Now that both of my covers are wrapped, I'm going to set those aside. I have my spine piece, 2.5 by 10, and one piece of cardstock that I've cut to 5 inches by 12 inches. On the back side, just like the pieces for the cover, I drew a line up 1 inch from the bottom to make my vertical line as a guide, and I'm going to adhere my spine piece right into the center of my paper, lining it up with that horizontal line at the bottom. Once I have my adhesive on, I will go ahead and place my piece down. And then use my bone folder to make sure that it's nice and adhered to my cardstock. Next, I'm going to take this and fold these edges over. Then I'm going to use my bone folder to crease those down first. And then I'm going to hold this flat and then I'm going to use my bone folder to crease this right into the edge, and it's going to make this paper here go slightly at an angle from the edge of my spine piece to the edge of the paper. Same thing on this side. I will adhere that, wrapping that chipboard and then flattening this out so it's creating 2 little wings or 2 little tabs that do go down. Going to open this piece all the way up and I'm going to apply my adhesive to the entire section. Starting with the middle section first, I'm going to adhere it to my spine piece. And then I'm going to repeat what I just did so that this will adhere closed with my spine wrapped at this section. Then I'm going to turn this over and do the same thing on this side. So pushing your bone folder into your chipboard first and then smoothing the rest down. Once I have my adhesive on, I'm going to apply the center section first, and then I'm going to smooth down my tabs so that they're nice and flat. And now I have both sides finished. I'm going to turn over in the opposite side and take my bone folder and run it up the side of my chipboard. So we're creating a crease here in the paper. Right up that side. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So now I have my two tabs. If I turn it over to this side, the paper is actually flush with the chipboard because we have wrapped these sides. If yours isn't flush, just continue to work your paper until it's flat. Now this paper is a little bit thicker than the typical 65-pound cardstock that I use, so it does need a little bit more work to get it to lay completely flat. And I'm going to remove this now because it will be showing if I don't erase that when I put my pieces together. So what we're going to do next, I'm going to take my ruler and use it as a guide for lining these pieces up. And I'm just going to set my spine piece down and I'm going to bump my ruler up against it. I'm going to take one of my covers and I'm going to lay it here. It should be the same exact size and it should lay flat against the ruler. So what I'm going to do is apply my adhesive here on this entire tab section. I don't want to go into my chipboard spine section, but I want to go right up to the edge of it because that is where this cover piece is going to lay, and it's going to be covered, and we need to make sure that it is here adhered completely to our paper so that it doesn't pull off. So once I have my adhesive, I'll go ahead and use my ruler to guide this, placing my pieces so that the bottom edges are together, and then pressing my cover up against my spine piece, adhering it down. Now this is called the lay flat method. There are many tutorials on YouTube with this cover design, so you can check out other tutorials if you want to see more, but obviously it is the same process. And you can do this with any size album, it will work. So that's the nice part. You don't have to leave that gap like you do when you are wrapping an album, like with the traditional type of wrap method that a lot of people use to create their covers. I'm going to turn my piece upside down for this next step. I'm going to add my adhesive to this side, doing the same thing as last time, just getting this right up to the edge of my spine, but making sure that I don't have any adhesive on my actual spine piece itself. Now I'm going to use my ruler with the first cover piece and the spine piece flat against the edge, and I will add my third cover piece, making sure that it's up against my spine piece and straight across the bottom. And then I'm going to adhere this down and use my bone folder to burnish. And then also burnish from the back side. So we have our covers together. We're going to put one more piece in the center to cover our spine. So this piece is 5 inches by 9 7/8 of an inch. And I'm going to place this here right over top. Basically, it's going to go from here to here where the spine piece and the wings are, covering the spine section so you won't see that chipboard when we place our hinges on. So I will cover the entire back side of my piece and then use the edges of the pieces here and here to line it up and center it top and bottom. Make sure that you burnish this paper really well so that it is fully adhered to the spine and to these tabs that are on the front cover. And now I'm going to leave my cover to dry. I want to make sure that all this glue is dry before I crease on these sides of the spine and bend this into a book shape. Now that I've given my adhesive time to dry, I'm going to take my bone folder and just start running it up this crease while I pull up on my cover. I just want to be careful here that I don't damage the paper. So you don't want to press too hard into the crease with the bone folder. You just want to be gentle as you score this and lift up. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Again, just running my bone folder in the crease and lifting up to form that book shape. And once I get it started, it's a little easier just to bend it on its own. Then I will bend it flat. And I actually like to bend my covers slightly back a little bit just to get them working so that it's not stiff whenever I go to add my pages in. So now I have my cover ready to go and we can begin building our hinge system for our pages. For the hinges, we need 2 pieces of cardstock. The first 2.5 by 9 3/4. The second 3.5 by 9 3/4. On the 2.5 by 9 3/4 inch piece, we're going to put the 2.5 inch side against the score lines, and we're going to score this at 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1.5, and 2 inches. Then for the 3.5 inch piece, we are going to score at 1/2, at 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and 3 inches. Next, I'm going to take my hinge pieces and using my bone folder, I'm going to fold on all of my score lines. To make sure that these will actually fold nice and straight, fold on one of the center lines first and make sure that the edges line up before you adhere or you smooth the pieces down so that they don't shift and move. And then they will be straight, crisp folds. Once those score lines are folded in one direction, I'm going to flip them the opposite direction and burnish them again. I'm going to do the same thing with the larger hinge. Again, starting in the center, making sure that my edges are lined up, and then start burnishing these, and I will burnish in both directions. Once I have all of my hinges folded, I'm going to come in here on this last 1/2 inch piece from the score line, and I'm going to trim from the score line inward. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side so that I have these nice little tabs for my pages to go down. I'm going to do the same thing on my smaller hinge section as well, just cutting those corners on the outer 1/2 inch sections. In the middle 1/2 inch section on the smaller tab, I'm going to apply adhesive to this entire section here, and I'm going to adhere this down to the middle section on the larger second tab to put these all together. So in here in my center, I'm going to line up my bottom edge, and then I'm going to make sure that I'm staying between those score lines on that piece, lining up my top edge, and I'm going to fold this over to make sure that I'm on that score line on both sections. And then I'm going to adhere this down. Next, I'm going to bring my cover in. I'm going to use my centering ruler to mark so that I know where to place my hinge. So the flat part of this hinge is going to be 1.5. So I need to mark 3/4 inches from the center on the top and bottom. Then I'll take my hinge piece and just double check and make sure it is correct. Next, I'm going to apply my adhesive on the 3 middle sections of my larger hinge. Once you have your adhesive down, go ahead and line your piece up between those marks that you made to center it on the page, and then adhere this down to your spine so that it lays nice and flat. Once you have your hinges adhered down, you can go ahead and flip those up. So we now have our 4 hinges in our album. So this is it for the first part of the tutorial, where we've got our album with our 4 base pages. So in the next tutorial, we will begin building up the pages with the interactive elements. We'll go through all of those before we begin with the decorative paper. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that. Don't forget, if you are just joining the tutorial series, all of the products that I will be using from the Stamperia Ooh La La collection that are from the Scrap and Create website will be linked in the description box below. So you go ahead and click on those links, purchase all of these products, and go ahead and follow along with me in the rest of the tutorial.